There's panic in the Kremlin. Peskov's mustache is curling up into a tube. The friendship with Trump, which was so joyfully celebrated in the swamps, is starting to turn into a disaster for Russia. The honeymoon period between the Moth and Uncle Donald has seriously angered Moscow's main sponsor and patron China.
I have to admit I didn't expect Putin to be so foolish as to quickly ruin his relationship with Xi Jinping and lose his trust. In other words, the absolutely obvious outcome of recent events is that China is extremely dissatisfied with Putin's behavior. China has realized that he is an unreliable partner.
While the U.S. Special Envoy Vitkov, with a sentimental tear, tells stories about how Putin prays for Trump and paints his portraits, the Chinese are getting ready to stab him in the back.
President Putin commissioned a truly beautiful portrait of President Trump from a leading Russian artist and then gave it to me, specifically asking me to take it home to President Trump, which I certainly did, and I successfully delivered it. It was mentioned in the newspapers, but it was such a gracious moment. He told me a truly remarkable story, Tucker, about how, when the president was tragically shot at, he immediately went to his local church, met with his trusted priest, and fervently prayed for him.
What the hell are you truly talking about?
Beijing responded to such revelations in a symmetrical manner. China began to move closer to the European Union and Ukraine.
The entire international community is striving for peace and stability more than ever before. And more than ever, it truly expects healthy and stable relations between China and the European Union.
Ukraine and China have recently signed a new agreement to significantly expand agricultural exports, which has increased the range of Ukrainian products available in China. And it is important to note that China is also one of the world's largest exporters of agricultural products. And this is happening while the Russians and the American administration are both loudly claiming that Ukraine has already lost the war. Apparently, China doesn't think so, since it's signing long-term contracts with Kyiv.
It is reported that China will be buying, attention, fish and peas from Ukraine. And before this, China imposed a 10% tariff in response to US agricultural products, right? And that's how China started. And who did the US start flirting with? With the Russians? And trying to hurt China. In response, China started flirting with Europe and the Ukrainians.
With Europe, it's even more interesting. China took advantage of the information and economic war that Trump declared on the EU and announced that it was ready to become the main trading partner of the old world instead of the US. While the red-haired Donald is actively liking Putin's provocative posts about European lapdogs who will eagerly come running to his feet, and the United States are threatening Europe with wild and punitive tariffs, China is strategically offering the EU significant investments and favorable trade preferences.
Wait, you mean that was an option all along?
Even in Brussels itself, they're not opposed to turning toward the east, especially since the US itself is breaking off the economic alliance. Washington keeps saying around the clock that Europe is a bad partner, and how great it would be to do business with Putin's Russia.
Let's be honest, the European Union was created to make life difficult for the United States. That's their primary goal, and they've certainly done a very good job of achieving it. But now that I am president, we have made a significant decision, and we will announce it very, very soon. It will be a 25% tax, basically, on all imported cars and other goods. The European Union is a distinctly different case than Canada, a completely different situation. They truly took advantage of us in a very different way. They don't accept our cars. They basically don't accept our agricultural products. They use all sorts of excuses for this. Why can't we?
While Trump is imposing tariffs on European cars, China is ready to support European car manufacturers. The American corporation Ford is preparing for large-scale job cuts in Cologne. The European-American car manufacturer Stellantis is halting production at the Fiat plant in Turin for 1.5 months. And the Chinese are planning to invest money in unprofitable German factories and are building plants in Hungary, Turkey, and Spain. Of course, China is pursuing its own interests, but against the backdrop of Washington's aggressive and unpredictable policies, the European market might make a somersault toward the Great Wall of China.
The European Union in the end might actually divorce America, completely stop trading in dollars, and significantly load its industry with substantial military orders for which there will be quite a high, considerable and pressing demand.
China is acting absolutely logically and consistently. After all, the US openly declares that it wants to improve relations with Mordor in order to pull it away from Beijing. And Moscow is happy to agree to this. Putin is even ready to give up his own natural resources to the Americans.
By the way, we would also be fully and completely ready to offer our American esteemed partners. When I say partners, I specifically mean both administrative and construction organizations and companies. If they showed genuine and significant interest in working closer together, we undoubtedly have, and I want to emphasize this, an order of magnitude more resources of this kind than Ukraine.
Putin is openly making it clear that he is ready to betray China for Washington's treats. And that's shooting himself in both feet. After all, Russia's ability not just to continue the war but to exist at all depends on China. China is the main buyer of oil and resources from Muscovy, as well as the supplier to Russia of absolutely everything, from sanitary pads to components for missiles. Without Chinese imports, Russia would literally fall apart like an old shed, because it can't even produce nails on its own.
For example, it was something of a revelation to me. I'm now trying to get down to all sorts of little details. Our nails are imported. I won't name the country, but you can guess in 3 tries. We don't even produce our own nails in a country that manufactures so much metal.
China has decided to put Moscow in its place. At the UN, regarding the Ukrainian resolution that recognizes Russia as the aggressor, the US voted against it, while China abstained.
At the beginning of this week, the US broke ranks with its European allies and sided with Russia in 2 votes held at the UN. The topic was the war in Ukraine. This is probably the most public and striking demonstration to date that with the arrival of Donald Trump, there has been a fundamental shift in the US attitude toward Ukraine. And all of this is happening as we mark the 3rd anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion.
Notably, for the first time since the start of Russia's full-scale aggression, journalists from a Chinese television channel filmed a report from the Ukrainian armed forces side. And they didn't just report on the situation from the Ukrainian side, they actually filmed Russian occupiers being shelled by Grad rocket launchers.
And we immediately went with them to another secure location to carry out the critical mission of launching rockets at the Russian side. The sound is actually very loud and quite intense, and you can feel a strong piercing ringing near your ear, which then suddenly disappears completely. We just launched only 4, but they might launch several more rockets after this.
A report like this would be simply impossible without the approval of the highest Chinese leadership. At the same time, Z-patriots are shrieking that China is supplying Ukraine with a huge amount of drone components. And Ukrainian drones are taking out orcs in massive numbers.
We have one ally who supplies everything, drones to everyone.
To that country and to the other one as well.
And then, 2 loud warning bells sounded from China for Russia, so loud that the Tsar bell in Moscow cracked. In peace negotiations with the aggressor, China has effectively taken Kyiv's side. When the US started pressuring Ukraine and Europe, pushing them toward an unfair peace with Moscow, Beijing sharply opposed it. China condemned Washington's desire to conduct peace talks with Russia without the participation of Ukraine and Europe. China's special envoy for European affairs, Liu She, stated that he is astonished by how Donald Trump behaves with the US's allies in Europe and emphasized that the peace agreement on Ukraine cannot be made without Ukraine.
Beijing has taken a firm stance against peace negotiations without the participation of Ukraine and the European Union. Chinese diplomat Liu She stated that a peace agreement cannot be determined solely by the US and Russia. Liu She also hinted to Europe that China is a more reliable partner than the US. China is logically criticizing Trump's policies. Beijing appears to be trying to take the place that Washington is vacating on the world stage.
Through its representative, Beijing also suggested to its European friends to take advantage of the situation and reconsider their attitude toward China, adopting a more positive stance. In other words, let's be friends and trade.
China will actively work with the European Union to consistently maintain a strong partnership approach, significantly strengthen strategic communication, coordination and cooperation, jointly and firmly defend multilateralism, diligently work together to effectively address pressing global challenges, inject new and vital energy into China-EU relations, and provide greater certainty and stability for a turbulent and ever-changing world.
The second warning sign for the Kremlin is the information that China is ready to join the pro-Ukrainian coalition and send its peacekeepers to Ukraine.
This option is currently being discussed by Beijing with representatives of the European Union, according to the German newspaper Welt am Sonntag. Chinese representatives held informal consultations in Brussels, during which they inquired about how European countries would react to such a scenario.
Soon after, Beijing denied this news. But where there's smoke, there's always fire. Most likely, this was China's final, definitive warning to Moscow, a subtle yet clear hint to its well-fed vassal. If you cozy up to the American uncle, you will be sent the very same way as the cruiser Moskva.
Who are you people? I didn't invite you. Get the hell out.
Moscow really did get scared. Perhaps that's why the negotiations with Trump are being delayed. Putin had managed to promise the Americans the moon and the stars, but now with China stepping firmly on his tail, he's squirming and writhing like a worm on a scorching hot pan because China does not easily forgive betrayal.
Due to significant US sanctions and persistent payment issues, the Russian occupiers at the front lines might also ultimately end up without essential body armor, which they had been quietly buying from various Chinese sources and deceptively passing off as domestically manufactured. It will be even harder to acquire cheap drones from Chinese websites and falsely present them as Russian-made. 10 categories of products are now banned, from toxins and microorganisms to aerospace technology. And each of these categories contains thousands of product items.
Putin dreamed of redrawing the world, and now he's going to get it. Beijing is forming a new global alliance between China and Europe. And Russia's place on the new world map is somewhere near the latrine. For 3 years, China watched as the great geostrategist tried to capture Kyiv in 3 days. And in the end, the fighting is happening in the Kursk and Belgorod regions.
When all sorts of, and I won't mince words, ghouls write to you that there are no enemies in the demilitarized zone. The difference is that they're sitting somewhere warm, while I'm here. That's it. Anyway, good morning.
Why would China need such a little ally? As a raw materials appendage, it's still perfectly okay, but definitely not as an equal and truly respected partner. That's what Europe and Ukraine are primarily for.
I would like to remind you that this video is created for entertainment purposes and contains elements of satire and irony. All facts and events are presented in a hyperbolized or exaggerated form to convey a comedic or dramatic effect. Our goal is not to mislead, but to highlight humor. Please take it with a smile.